Yeah, this is probably one of DC's best movies. Just gonna say that right now. What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Animation Station, your number one strategy branding and everything animation. Welcome back to DC Ally, and welcome to the third of our DC Universe animated movie reviews. Justice League: The New Frontier, based off the comic book of the same name. This one is very, very fascinating. It is set in the 50s. It has the old school designs of pretty much all the superhero characters, from Superman having that Ray Fleischer look with the way his emblem is, to Batman having purple gloves back in the day, or Wonder Woman's design, or all the designs are incredibly unique and very old school. And the movie, instead of having action, instead of being focused on the action, it's instead more of a dialogue-driven character piece about the formation of the Justice League and how it's lasted through the ages, specifically through the ending. But this is a fantastic, very well done, dialogue-driven character piece and a great time capsule of the early 1950s. It is a fantastic movie, and I'm excited to dive into it. This one was a first-time watch for me. I had heard little mixed opinions here and there from some people online about the movie, but I was looking forward to it. I was quite excited. You know what? The first Justice League movie from this DC Universe animated lineup. Let's see how it goes. And then I saw the old school designs, and I immediately fell in love with it. But before we get to the designs or any of that, I do have to mention some of the flaws of the movie, because since this is a mostly positive review, and I'm going to tell you right now, this movie is great and you absolutely need to go watch it, it does have some problems, and I can't quite call it, phenomenal or a masterpiece. It's not nearly as great or near perfect masterclass as Mask of the Phantasm was, which is still the high bar we've set through these reviews so far. But I'd probably put this one... Where would I put it? I'd put it under Mask of the Phantasm, but over Superman Doomsday. Oh wait, no, this is actually the second of the DC Animated Universe movies. I'm sorry. The second of the DC Animated Universe films. And since this one is before Flashpoint Paradox, this one is its own self-contained story. It's not worried about, setting up a big universe or anything like that. It's its own self-contained story, trying to do a great job adapting the source material, the New Frontier comic, while also being its own unique thing. And trust me, it succeeds at that, but it still has a few little negatives that I need to talk about, which unfortunately keeps me from being able to call it, phenomenal or outstanding. The first one, and the biggest one in my opinion, is that this one puts a big focus on Green Lantern's origin. Now, granted, it's a very well done origin, and Hal Jordan in this movie is excellent and very true to his actual comic book counterpart. But the problem is he gets so much focus that a lot of the other superheroes, especially Batman in particular, really get little to no screen time. And in the case of Aquaman especially, only one or two actual scenes. And look, I like Green Lantern. He is a cool hero, and I'm glad that they did put focus on him. But it's too much focus. Way too much focus. And it does kind of drag the story down a little bit. But it's not to the point of ruining the movie. It's just to the point of, well, we've already focused so much on this character. Can we please go focus on another hero? But no, we don't get that. It's mostly a Green Lantern origin story with the whole Justice League formation thing playing in the background. And that's both a pro and a con. It's a double-edged sword. It's cool because it's very rare that Hal Jordan ever gets time to shine in any movie, animated or live action. But also the fact that he is a really good, fascinating, interesting character. But the problem is when you put so much focus on him, and you already have all these other heroes that you have to juggle around, more than likely a bunch of them are going to get less screen time. And that's what happened here. Green Lantern gets the most screen time out of all the heroes. And it especially annoyed me a bit that it took away from Batman, especially, because this is one of the most fascinating interpretations of Batman I have seen in a while. Not only because of his awesome costume design, which actually changes 3 times in the movie. He has one with the purple gloves of his iconic original iteration. Then he gets the black suit, and then he gets an Adam West reminiscent suit. Like, why does Batman have so many costume changes? I don't know, but they're all old school. They all look directly out of the old school Batman comics, and they all look really cool. And I really want to know more about this Batman, but unfortunately, he gets very pushed to the side because they focus so much on Green Lantern. So, that's a huge bummer. That's my only huge gripe with the movie, but it's something that definitely needs to be discussed. And, oh, what were my other negatives? Let me go back to my Facebook real quick. I did put out a written review, but it's not as in-depth as my usual ones. Because I want to try to encourage people to actually watch these video reviews, since I'm putting so much time and analysis into these than I usually do. Let me see. Rushed third act, underdeveloped villain. And I already mentioned Green Lantern lessening the screen time of other heroes because of his massive focus. Yeah, the third act is definitely very rushed. It's not bad by any means, but it is definitely very rushed, and it does lead into the actual, Green Lantern origin coming to a close, and it's not in the most satisfying of ways. It works for the story it's trying to tell, but it's not very memorable. And another little nitpick, and this one is a minor little thing that I think people need to know when going into this movie, whenever they decide to watch it, is Superman. He gets very sidelined in this movie. Like, there's one great part where he gives this great speech right before the final battle, and then he's, taken out immediately. It is ridiculous. And it is the one part of the movie I'm just like, oh, come on. He gives such a great speech right before the big final battle, and then right when he goes to do recon and actually plan things out, he immediately gets decimated and sent into the ocean for the rest of the fight, pretty much taking him out. Yeah, that was a huge bummer. Yes, it does show the actual effectiveness of the villain, but at the time it also makes Superman himself look incompetent. Which is anything but with his actual character. But he does have some really nice scenes near the beginning of the movie. He does have a great conversation with Wonder Woman in a village. And then he also has a great conversation with Lois Lane on the rooftop of the Daily Planet. But in that final battle, he just gets completely thrown to the side. Huge bummer. An underdeveloped villain. Yes, the center is very well built up, but it gets no development. We get one little opening where he possesses one guy to write this storybook, and then off himself. And then after that, it's nothing. Then he's just a giant island trying to destroy things. That's literally it. Outside of that, very underdeveloped villain. He was effective for what he was, especially taking out Superman as quick as he did, but again, it makes Superman look incompetent, and he, the villain himself, the center, gets no development. So, yeah, that is a huge bummer. But that's literally all my negatives. So let's start with the positives, and let's start with this voice cast. My goodness, this voice cast. First up, the star of the movie is David Boreanaz as Hal Jordan. He is great in this movie. I did complain about Green Lantern getting over-focused, but he does a great job. And this guy does a great job as his character. So, yeah, he does great. Then we have John Johns, or Martian Manhunter, voiced by Miguel Ferrer. He does pretty good. I thought he is also a bit underutilized, but we learn a decent bit about him, and he does have a really cool little friendship with one of the generals that he meets. So, yeah, he does pretty good. Barry Allen is voiced by Neil Patrick Harris. Yes, that's Neil Patrick Harris. And he was surprisingly one of the best parts of the movie. Yeah, that surprised me too. Like, I usually am not a fan of this guy. I don't find him funny, and I think he's most of the time just annoying and agitating. But here, he actually really fit Flash, and I could barely tell it was even him. Like, he did a really good job as the character. I'm gonna give him credit. Then we have Ace Morgan, voiced by John Hurd. Probably one of his best roles, right next to David Boreanaz as Hal Jordan. And Ace is Jordan's friend, and you see that friendship throughout the movie, and they do have a great camaraderie, and you can tell that they're friends. But again, because they put so much focus on Hal specifically, Ace barely gets any development. So that's a bummer. But he does a great job with the role. May he rest in peace. Lucy Lawless as Wonder Woman is probably one of the best parts of the movie. Very much fits the character, especially this 50s setting that they're in, and especially Wonder Woman's whole philosophy, which really works in this movie. Like, seriously, Lucy Lawless is a great Wonder Woman. Then we have Kyle MacLachlan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, voicing Superman. And I know I kind of complained about this as well when I reviewed Doomsday, but Superman does sound a bit bland, but here I feel like that was intentional because this is set in the 50s and it was supposed to, sound of the time period. And let's be honest, guys, of that time period, sometimes in shows like that, the acting was very flat. So honestly, it actually fits the time period that this movie's set in, which is the 50s. And when you think about it from that lens, he does a great job replicating that style, but at the same time, he gets sidelined in the final battle, and he gets little to no development. Like, he's just there. But again, like I said, he also gives a great speech right before that final battle. That's definitely one of the most memorable parts of the movie. Then there's Lex Lang voicing Rick Flag. He's fine. He barely does anything. King Faraday's voiced by Phil Morris. He does okay. Kyra Sedgwick, I don't know how to pronounce that, voices Lois Lane. She does a pretty good job. Brooke Shields voices Carol Ferris. She does a pretty good job. But the one that I need to talk about, and I very much attribute to why this interpretation of this particular character is so fascinating to me, is Jeremy Sisto's Batman. Like, A, we never see him out of costume, which is interesting. And B, is the voice. It is very, very different from the Batmans we're used to. He's nothing like Michael Keaton or Kevin Conroy or Roger Craig Smith. Like, his voice is very, very unique for Batman. And at first, I was a bit off-put by it. Like, this is Batman's voice in the movie? Okay. But as it played out and continued, it kind of started to make more sense. And especially with the Batman costume changes, which back in those old school comic books, Batman did a lot. Like, seriously, look it up. He has had so many costumes over the years from just those old school ones alone. It'll make your brain hurt trying to remember all of them. But yeah, Jeremy Sisto, while it's definitely a very unique interpretation of Batman, I feel like he does a great job with what he's given. Like, yes, it took a while for him to actually, for me to buy him as Batman, but it worked. And I especially really loved his little dialogue scene with Martian Manhunter. Like, that's a really, really good scene. So yeah, he does a great job. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. And then we have some of the, I'm just going to call them cameos because they really are cameos. Joe Alasky voices Bugs Bunny. Yeah, Bugs Bunny's in this for a brief moment as one of John's shapeshifts as he's watching TV, which is pretty funny. Jeff Bennett is the sportscaster, which is pretty alright. Townsend Coleman as Dr. Magnus is alright. Sean Donnellan as Haley is alright. Corey Burton as Abin Sur is pretty good, but because this is the Green Lantern origin story and we don't really know a whole lot about him, he's definitely underdeveloped. Real shame. Then Robert Atkin Downs is the Guardian for, I think, only one scene, but he does good for what he is. And as much as I find the Centaur a very underdeveloped villain, I do like the voice they got for him. Keith David. Yes, freaking Spawn. Like, that's cool. Like, I thought that voice sounded familiar, but it took me a little bit. And now looking at the IMDb page, yeah, it's Keith David. Keith David is an awesome voice actor, and again, I have my problems with the Centaur as an actual villain in terms of development, but voice acting wise, Keith David knocked it out of the freaking park. I mean, it's Keith David. Dude's a legend. What more do I need to say? So yeah, pretty solid, interesting voice cast. Like, some very unique decisions that I was surprised by. Neil Patrick Harris probably being the most surprising one. But definitely the highlight of the movie is David Boreanaz as Hal Jordan. And that's again because Hal gets so much focus over all the other heroes in the movie. Which I'm sure is the same way it was in the comic book, but at the same time, again, it lessens the screen time of other heroes. Like, I'm sure if he was given more material to work with, I'm sure Jeremy Sisto would have been able to really fully utilize his role as Batman. I really wanted more of his Batman. He did a really good job for the little bit that he was given. Next, let's talk about the designs. I did mention them a little bit earlier, but let's talk about them again, because I really love that this went with the old school comic book designs of that actual era. Especially Batman in particular, where the first scene we see him, fighting some of these underlings in a church, he has the purple gloves. Now, I know that sounds a bit weird, considering that Batman is not the one people were used to. But if you go back into those old school comic books, Batman did wear purple gloves. It was one of his first interpretations, and seeing that was very nostalgic, and it looked really cool on screen, too. Not to mention, this Batman is not as merciful as most. Like, he is very frightening. In his first scene, he is very, very ruthless. Like, seriously. And then, of course, later on, like I said, he does get the black and gray suit, which does look pretty cool. And then, for the final battle, he dons the Adam West blue and gray suit. And yes, I can tell it's the Adam West suit. It's literally the exact same design, with just a few little changes since it's animated and not, live action. But all three suits look pretty good. But the one I definitely want to give some credit to, and the one that I was really surprised was included in here, was Superman's suit in particular. Not only is it very much like his old school comic books, but it reminds me a lot of the old Ray Fleischer cartoons. You guys know those that I'm talking about? The ones that were in black and white and then transitioned to color and had this very unique Superman design. Like this one in particular, with the yellow outline, the red S, and the flat black background. This was before we got the Superman shield logo that we're all used to. This was the old school Superman. And it looks really good on screen, especially with this updated animation. Which, don't worry, I'll talk about that in a bit. Then there's Flash's suit. It's okay. It doesn't really resemble his old school look at all, but it works. Green Lantern's suit is also pretty cool, but again, it's not the old school suit. It's the more modern suit we're used to, which is a bit weird. Martian Manhunter's design is pretty cool. I especially do like his actual human form, which is very reminiscent of the design that we are used to. But again, I feel like they could have really utilized his super old school design from the actual time period. And then there's Aquaman, who's barely changed at all over the years. Let's be honest. He's fine. Then there's Green Arrow, who's barely in the movie. He's fine. Very, very much the Green Arrow suit we know. So, yeah, the designs are really good. I especially love the super old school designs of the main three superheroes of the Justice League, but having them clash with some of the actual modern designs that we're used to, especially because this is supposed to be set in the 50s and not like the 90s or the 2000s, it is very off-putting. But it's a minor nitpick, and we don't really see all the designs together that much, so it's not that jarring, it's just something worth pointing out. And that even extends to some of the villains, like Captain Cold. He's voiced by, I believe it's James Arnold Taylor. He does a good job for the little bit that he gets, but it is a very much a little bit. Like, it's only like 5 minutes, he's here, and then he's gone the next. So, yeah, the designs are really good. I just wish that they actually stayed true to their actual initial, concept and stick with the old school designs of all the characters, not just the main three. Speaking of which, I should talk a little bit about Wonder Woman's old school design. Very much reminds me of the old Lynda Carter show, but at the same time, again, very reminiscent of the old school design from her first ever comic books. So, it's good. It's a really good design. I do kind of prefer the newer design we have now, but I do like this old school design. It very much fits the time period, and next to Superman and Batman's designs, it definitely works. So, yeah, the designs are really good. I just wish that they were consistent with the actual theming of sticking with the old school designs. So, anyway, moving on from that, let's talk about the actual animation. It's really good. It does definitely fit a 50s time period very well. I especially really love the detail about how whenever a character is watching TV in this movie, it's in black and white and very, very bad audio quality, like it was back then in the 50s, so it's very faithful to that. And it is really good, especially in the action scenes, and if you think that this movie's going to pull its punches and actually be as tame as the stuff from back then, you would be wrong, because there is some brutality in this movie. Like, definitely some very brutal moments. Like, let me think of a good example. Hal Jordan is in a fight with a Soviet because they haven't gotten the word of the ceasefire, and Hal Jordan's forced to put the gun up to the dude's face. And while we don't actually see what happens, it is shown in a silhouette. You hear the gunshot, you see the flash, and you just see the silhouette of blood spurt that comes out of his head. Like, brutal. Absolutely brutal. And again, Batman's first scene in this movie, he is also very brutal with his fighting style. Very much, not the Cape Crusader we're used to. He's not merciful, he doesn't pull his punches. He is pretty freaking ruthless. Like, there is a lot of blood in this movie, and a little bit of swearing, but it's not to the point of, like, R-rating stuff. But again, I feel like it also kind of fits the time period, because this is a more unrefined Dark Knight that we're not used to. Heck, there's a scene in this movie, at the very end of Batman's first scene in this movie, where he tries to save this little kid after taking out all these thugs, but the kid is scared to death of him. He thinks he's just as monstrous as the people he just kicked the crap out of. So, inspired by that, he, takes on a sidekick with Robin, who gets a little cameo in here, but he's alright. He does his best with the little bit that he gets. And he does change his suit design to be a little less menacing, which is where the black and gray suit comes in. And then later on, the final battle is when we get the blue and gray suit. The Adam West suit, I'm going to call it, because it's very much reminiscent of both the Adam West show and the super old school Batman comics. So, yeah, it is a bit brutal. There is some blood, there is some swearing, but it's nothing too super traumatizingly gruesome. It's not Dark Knight Returns. It's nowhere near that kind of brutality. So, yeah, there is some nice brutality in here, and it really fits with the action. And the action here is pretty good too, even though, again, this one is more of a character-driven dialogue piece. Like, it's not meant to be, like, super hyper-stylized action all the way through. This one is a lot like Superman Doomsday. It's a character piece. It relies more on the dialogue and the writing rather than action and over-the-top spectacle. Though there is some of that in the final act, and it is really well animated, but again, it's very rushed. But yeah, it's pretty good. Speaking of the story itself, I do like this story. Like, I really like this one. Like, let me find a little plot synopsis here to read to you, so you can get a basic idea. Adapting the award-winning Comics miniseries DC The New Frontier by Darwin Cook, Justice League The New Frontier spins a tale of the DC universe in the 1950s, focusing on test pilot Hal Jordan and the Martian Manhunter. The story also features other DC characters including Barry Allen, Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, and many more. Yeah, it's best that you go into this movie as blind and vague as possible, because it is a movie that's definitely not going to be for everybody. But if you are a self-respecting comic book fan, especially a lover of the old school comic books from the actual time period this movie takes place in, you're gonna really love this film, because the dialogue, the writing, it's all sharp, it's all really well done, it all makes sense, and yet it also fits with that 50s time period and has a little bit of cheesiness. So, yeah, I like the story. It's really well done here, and I'm pretty sure it's faithful to the comic. I haven't read the comic book. I just went into this movie completely blind, and I came out absolutely loving it, so... yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the story here. It's very well done. And then speaking of that writing, wow, this is probably some of the best writing outside of the Batman standalone films in this DC Universe lineup. Like, the writing here is so good, especially the dialogue between the heroes and the heroes specifically. Like, they are all well done here and all very well executed. I really loved hearing all the dialogue between all the superheroes. Like, it really just works. So, yeah, and this movie is PG-13. As if me telling you about the light brutality in this movie didn't already clue you in on that. It is PG-13, and it is a harder PG-13 than usual, but it's not like super hard PG-13. It's not the Batman. It's not like that. But sorry, this one's really hard to explain because I don't want to do full spoilers in this one for once, because I really love this movie and I want you guys to see it for yourself. It's arguably one of DC's best movies. Like, it's so well crafted, it's so well done, it so fits the time period, and it's incredibly nostalgic for fans of the characters that know where all these old school designs, iterations, and ideals all come from. Like, it is a great film. It really is a great movie. I just wish it didn't over-focus so much on Hal Jordan and Martian Manhunter. If it took a little bit more focus away from them so we could focus more on Superman and Batman, which, yes, I know they get focused a lot in other movies, but point is, they need to do a better job juggling all these characters that they had in the film, which I feel like they didn't quite utilize to its full extent. But yeah, the writing definitely deserves a lot of praise here. Stan Berkowitz and Darwin Cook did an amazing job with the writing. Yes, the person that actually made the comic book miniseries this is based on had a hand in writing the movie. And it really shows, because it shows a clear understanding of its source material. So, yeah, I've talked about the cons, I've talked about its many pros, I've talked about the nostalgia for the designs, I've praised the designs, I've praised the writing, I've praised the characterization, I've praised the voice acting. Is there anything left for me to really talk about? Honestly, not really. This is a movie that's better seen rather than explained. It is a great DC film, and especially if you're someone that loves those old school comic books from the time period of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, etc. This super old school DC. You are going to have a nostalgia trip with this. But just be aware, this is very much a Green Lantern story and less of an actual Justice League story. I know that sounds like false advertising, but trust me, it both works and doesn't work at the same time. You'll understand what I mean once you see it for yourself. Overall, a great film. I was really pleasantly surprised by this one. It was a great time, and as someone who is a big fan of the old school DC stuff, this one was a really fun, nostalgic watch. Like, I had a great time with this movie. And it's only an hour and 14 minutes. It is short, sweet, brief, and to the point. Seriously, check this one out. It is an absolute gem, and I can see now why it got a commemorative edition re-release later on. Like, it is a fantastic movie. that absolutely deserves your time, especially if you are an old school comic book fan. Final verdict for Justice League The New Frontier is going to be a high 8 out of 10. It is a great film. I definitely recommend it if you're a DC fan. And if you're an old school comic book fan, you are absolutely going to love this one. And before you say, well, the story and plot's a mess, it's supposed to fit the time period that it's set in. If it was any more well crafted and actually, well, different than the way it is and more like our modern stuff, it wouldn't fit the time period. So keep that in mind before you start bashing this movie like you're someone on IMDb. This is a great movie. Absolutely check this one out. Definitely a highlight of our DC lies so far. Not quite as great as Mask of the Phantasm, but for a second installment in this DC Universe animated movie pantheon, it is a great one, and it's a very impressive animated film. Absolutely check this one out. Heck, according to IMDb, it even got nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award. Yes, nominated for a Primetime Emmy. The same thing that the Batman animated series won, 3, 4 freaking times? Like, you have to really make something a quality to be nominated for that. Unless you're SpongeBob, then you get a free pass, but whatever. Point is, this movie's awesome. You need to check it out if you haven't already. It is a great, nostalgic, fun film that has great ideals, great ideologies, and great storytelling. And that's literally all I can say. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you guys tomorrow when we take another dive into the Caped Crusaders back catalog by taking a look at a movie that I haven't heard a single thing about. Like, literally nothing. I'm going into this next one completely blind, even as a huge Batman nerd. So, yep, I'll see you guys tomorrow for my first watch review of Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero.